family. We are here for episode 23 of our podcast. My name is Marlena.
I'm Rob G's.
And today we have our good friend James, of course, Bud's Kitchen. And today we have a special guest, Merril Hoge, here with us today. We're going to be talking to him about all things football, entrepreneurship, and how he got into his motivational speaking that he's doing currently. Talk about his 2 books. And just, overcoming adversity and, entrepreneurship. So, episode 23, we are back, and we do have a new name for our podcast that we want to introduce to you guys.
Yeah, we are super excited. Welcome to the More Value, More Waves, the Swavey Podcast, which is
so that'll be our new podcast name. We're super excited about it. And then, of course, so let's dive right in, episode 23. So, Mr. Hoge, I'm sure you get this a lot, but was football, I know you were drafted in 87 by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and was football always something that was your sport, that's what it was, or was there another sport or other sports that kind of had your attention?
Well, to tell you where it all started, I don't have to explain some things to you. I probably use YouTube. Well, I'm talking about all 3 of you. Probably. Well, you were not. None of you were alive in 1972.
No.
Okay. In 77. Okay. So here's what's important about 72 and 77. Well, I don't have one in here. Ironically, it's probably the first room I don't have a TV. Okay. So you go to anywhere and you're probably gonna run into a TV, right? Okay. 1972, 1977. You're lucky if you had a TV. We didn't have a TV.
Yeah, the TVs. Did they have the TVs that sat on the floor?
Yeah, well, yeah, they were on the floor and they were a big box, and not everybody had them. And we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a TV, but my grandparents had a TV. And if you had a TV, you only had 3 channels.
Right.
So, and listen, to that point, if you're on the couch and you didn't like what you were watching, you had to get up and go over the TV and say, okay, so I'm only sharing that with you because I loved playing the game of football, but I had no idea it was on television.
Oh.
And see, I know people, that's why I set that up, because the second that you guys could probably open your eyes and before you were out of diapers, you had a TV, you had access to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I just create that perspective because I did not have that access. I didn't even know that they played television, or football on television, until I went to my grandparents' house one day. I was 8 years old, so this is 1972, around 72, 73, and I walked in and the Green Bay Packers were playing. Okay. I don't remember who they were playing, but I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing that in the backyard. I was like, I had no idea that you could do it on television. Right. So from that second on, that's what I wanted to do.
It was probably black and white.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Color come out to like the 80s.
Yeah, color. I can't remember exactly when color came out, but the first TVs, period was all black and white. So you didn't have the
it was mostly news and local sports, like you said, and then I think it was like Julia Child or something like that.
So seeing it on TV at that, when you came to the realization that this is played on television, this is not just something I'm doing in the backyard. From that moment, it was football.
That was a goal.
I
don't know if when you guys grew up, I don't know if you heard these types. I still think that these are said. What I'm about to say, I still think these are said to kids when you're growing up. Or asked what do you want to do when you grow up? When you're growing up, what do you want to be? Like you were talking about, your basketball family.
Right.
And maybe some families it's like, you gonna play basketball, or what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And so I had been asked that as a kid, and I remember I was around 8 years old. It was about the same, because it all happened about the same time. And I remember thinking, I remember I don't know what I want to do. Not that the kids that are 8 years old know what they want to do.
Right.
But I remember thinking, that's fascinating. I've never thought about that. And I thought, that was a great question, because I'm going to think about what I would want to do. Because so shortly after that, I see the Packers on television. Right. So now I know. I was like, holy cow! Now I know. Now what happened to me though, when people would ask me what you wanted to do, or what do you want to do, I tell them, and then they would immediately say, oh, You know how hard that is? Or do you know what the odds of you playing in the NFL are?
They still
Oh,
say
don't
that,
put
yeah.
all your eggs in one basket, so I
Yeah.
don't want you to be
They
disappointed.
still say that.
Yeah.
Right, and see, so this is why I see things through a child's eyes more than most adults. Think about this: the people who are supposed to encourage you are the first ones to discourage you.
Right.
Yeah.
Without
Then
even trying to.
But then it speaks to the resiliency of young people, kids. Like, I never bothered me. I never got fazed by that. I was never discouraged. When they said that, I still believed I would play in the National Football League. And that led me to creating. So the other thing I was going to tell you is that I would hear as a kid, like, write your goals down. You know, put them up in your room. You know, write them down so you see them every day.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's a great idea, but I had two problems. I had a little brother and a bunk bed. So I wasn't putting anything in my bedroom without getting torn down.
Right.
So that was a great idea, but it wasn't going to work for me. So we had a basement that was just concrete, and my dad announced like he was going to make 2 bedrooms down there, and a family, and one of the bedrooms was going to be mine. So I was like, oh, I always envisioned if I did have my own room, the only thing I would care about in my room is a wall of cork, because I'd be able to pin goals up, I'd be pinning things up.
Yeah.
And so that's where it started. So he makes a wall of cork. I pinned the goal up I would play in the National Football League.
Oh wow.
And this is what I call my first moment of truth in life. Like, we all have them. A moment of truth is where you have to make a decision. There's a choice. And that choice is going to be significant in the outcome of the direction you go in life.
Right.
So I was sitting there looking at how I played in the National Football League. I started thinking about everything people had said to me, you know, how hard it was. And I don't know that anything in life is easy. So I really think it was stupid. Who goes, you want to pick something that's really easy.
Right.
You know, you just lay in there and you just,
Right.
there's nothing that's of value I know nothing of the value that's easy, to be
Right.
honest with you. So, but when I was sitting there looking at that goal, I just was thinking about all those things. And it was the only time in the whole journey that I was completely deflated.
Yeah.
And that's where the words find a way, like, changed my life from a perspective position, in that the words find a way popped into my head and it energized me.
Yeah.
It inspired one thing that we can do. Doesn't matter what your goal is. I mean, I'm sitting next to this guy because of this. Okay, like he's a great example of taking action.
Right.
You know, hearing somebody talk, because I'm a product of a lot of people, but I'll share a few of them with you that were significant in my life. I'm the one guy that I'll get to right away. But those words resonate with me, so I actually moved my goal down. I would play in the National Football League, and that's how I wrote it out. I put a picture of Walter Payton, who's my favorite player. The Steelers were my favorite team as a kid. I even had a symbol of the NFL. I moved it down, and I wrote down this 8x10 cards I had, Find a Way. And I put that at the top of my wall, because what it always did for me is it inspired action, and it energized me. Because it's, everybody's been on a journey. You've been discouraged. You've been down, and you know something doesn't go. Everybody, there's going to be those days that don't go your way.
Right.
And when I walk in that room, it would re-energize me. Is what they did. It inspired action, but it re-energized me. But I got excited about it. I was like, holy cow! I mean, like, then I realized that I was responsible for this goal.
Right.
Nobody else was responsible for it. Nobody was going to give me. Wasn't they were going to hand me a job in the National Football League, but I had a chance to go earn it. And so those words they continue to inspire me. They continue to help me. And that's what actually when it all started.
Yeah.
And so
Wait, so the whole Find a Way started when you was a kid?
yeah, it was 12,
Dang, man.
1977.
It's crazy how that comes. You haven't gotten there yet, but like how that comes full circle.
Full circle is, I really understand what that means.
Yeah, so it's a good one. And I'm telling you, like, I mean, here's what Find a Way is about. Now when I speak, I'm going to kind of jump forward, because the chef sitting here, it's like, if I never hear another story like this, like doing what I've done is worth that. Okay, so Walter Payton impacted my life indirectly. Never met him until my rookie year, and then when I played the Chicago Bears, I got to know him better. Chuck Noll impacted my life. But here's what Find a Way is about. Find a Way is not about me. Find a Way is about getting other people to realize what's in them, what they possess, what they're in control of, what they're in charge of.
Right.
And when he told me that story, that, you know, when he heard me speak, first he didn't think about me, he thought about, okay, he thought about himself, what he wanted to do, where he wanted to be, and then he took action and look where he is today.
I told you that story, right?
And that, to me, that when he said that, I was like, my wife and I were just like, holy cow, like if I never hear another story, and I've heard many, but I mean, that one was just like, that's why I love speaking. That's why I like sharing that message, because this just happened recently. I've been speaking for 15 years, and this guy asked me, if I were to hire you, what's your goal? And I really don't have a goal until I hear, like, you hiring me, and I go, what's your goal? What's your goal for your team or your company? What is the message you're trying to do? So I'm going to build on that. Mm-hmm. So that's my goal, to build your message. I don't want the goal. But I've never been asked that before because of that. And I said, well, I thought about it for a second, and I'm like, well, if I speak for your group or your group or your group, and I get done and they're talking about me, I did a really bad job. But if everybody in that room is thinking about themselves and what they want to do and what they can do and the hope that they have, then I've done a good job. Yeah. And this had just happened, and then we go to Stan Mark's house, I run the shack, he tells me a story. I'll tell you, it was just a real surreal. I think that, for all the speeches I've done, everywhere I've been, all the people who've impacted my life, then to hear what he did after he heard that, because that's what it's about. It's not about me, it's about what you have, what you possess, and he applied it.
I didn't even know, I actually thought that I was happy working for that one call place, and I was like 19 years old, getting good money, and I hear this speech, and I'm like, this is not it. I gotta quit, and I just quit. And then on this journey, the whole find a way thing is like the thing that made me move out here. It's the thing that makes me like want to keep learning. It's the thing that makes me not want to be quiet in the back of a room full of people. It's just.
So with public speaking, I'm sure you know. You probably listen to Eric Thomas.
He's a
Motivational speaker, Eric Thomas, E.T.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you know what, because there's actually a bunch of Eric Thomases. One of them played for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
So like, just when you Google it, I'm like, I forget you guys are kids. Eric Thomas played. I think he was drafted the same year I was played. But yes, I know who Eric Thomas is.
I should have said E.T. because I think I looked him up.
But no, I still thought E.T. That's what we say. We call him E.T. So it's like, yes,
I don't know why I said Eric Thomas.
I do know though.
When I said it, he was like,
yeah.
Who's Eric Thomas?
Well, no, I'm like, how do you know Eric Thomas?
Yeah.
You know, but when I think of public speaking, you know, those are, guys like him. You know, so when I talk to people that public speak, they often listen to E.T. You know, I got to see him in Dallas. What was it, like a year ago?
Last year.
Yeah, it was wild.
So, what got you into? Well, I wanted to ask because you said that on your board in your room as a kid, you had the Pittsburgh Steelers and the NFL logo. So, when you were in college, and was that just like, okay, I guess what I'm asking is, was it the same process as it is now, as you submit or
actually, it's a little different. Well, how you get into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, it's changed a little bit. When I was in college, you had to play all 4 years.
Okay.
Like you when somebody went in.
College, you had to play.
You had to play all 4 years. You weren't eligible for the draft unless you were a senior.
Okay.
So even you redshirt.
2 years.
I believe you got to be in college for 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Right. So you have to play 2 years. You can redshirt in 2 years, and then you're eligible, so you can leave. I think as a sophomore.
Okay.
So they changed that. They changed that when you could come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's really kind of the only. It's not probably the only difference from being able to come out. You know how they recruit. The combine. I went to the combine, so the combine was still around.
Mm-hmm.
I think they didn't have film back then. Jeez, that's how long ago. They don't have footage back then. I don't think they filmed it, to be honest with you. Just the combine, and it was in Indianapolis too. So.
Were you just happy, or I guess, it was probably another like full circle moment, being that you put the Steelers on your board as a kid, and then you got drafted by them.
Yeah, actually, see, I made a mistake, and I don't know if it was a mistake, but I wouldn't suggest you do it. When I was at the combine, they asked you, a lot of people ask you, like, who do you want to play for?
Oh, okay.
Who would you like to play for? Anybody you want to play for? Now, really, the right thing to say is, I just like playing the National Football League.
Right.
Whoever gets me, and I hate the Dallas Cowboys so bad.
Yeah.
Now this goes back. See, now you guys can appreciate, but you really appreciate it when you're in the 70s, during the 70s. That the only game that you would see the Steelers play is usually a Monday night game or Super Bowl.
Right.
Or Thanksgiving. True, like national games. Like I go back to, if you're in Pocatello, Idaho, you don't see any of the East Coast.
Right. You only see that area.
You see none of that. I mean, you maybe see a highlight.
Right.
You see the highlight reel, and that's it. You see the San Diego Chargers or the Denver Broncos or Seattle. And that's if they have a game on.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like today where you can DirecTV, you can watch everything.
Right.
So they didn't have that aspect. So, but the Dallas Cowboys, I had this. Her name was Michelle in my math class, and she was a Dallas Cowboy. And she was a Dallas Cowboy. And she's annoying.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
Yeah.
So I had another ounce of like, I just can't stand Dallas
Right.
Cowboys.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah, my whole
every time
family
they won the Super Bowl.
My mom side loves the Cowboys, and I just never liked them.
Yeah.
I run the people that live in Pittsburgh are cold-hard Dallas fans, and you never even been to Dallas.
I actually like Dallas. I
like Dallas.
I got a lot of friends that are Dallas Cowboys. Now, like, but my point was, I got to Indianapolis and I said, no, there's just one team I don't want to play for, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. And that's probably not the best thing.
What was it about the Dallas Cowboys that you didn't want to play for them?
Just because of Michelle, who was in my math class, I was so irritated with it. I felt like that was the Dallas Cowboys. So I thought, if I'm playing with the Dallas Cowboys, that's who I'm representing.
Right.
And I'd rather, and at the end of the day, every Super Bowl, the Steelers won anyway. So it was,
Right.
I want to be for the winning team. I want to play for the Steelers. No, I never dreamed. And the Steelers did come. After the combine, what happens is teams actually kind of fine-tune players and target guys that they might be drafting, and they go out and rework them out, revisit them, look at them again. So the Packers came to see me, Washington came to see me, the Raiders, who I was projected to go to, I was projected to go to the Raiders in the 5th round, and then the Steelers came. But the only thing different about the Steelers, they're the only team that never worked me out. Every other team worked me out again. They had me work out. And when I went to meet with the scout about working out, because what they would do is they tell you the day before they're coming, you meet them down at the facility, and then you work out. Well, when I got there, he was watching film, and so they said he's back in that room. So I went there, and I go, "You want me to?" Coach would let me to get ready and just work out, and he's like, "Nah." He goes, "You play basketball?" Speaking of basketball, he goes, "You play basketball?" And I thought it was a trick question. And I was really good at basketball actually in high school. That was like one of my favorite.
Did you dunk?
No, I was close. Cause see, my son is like a little tall. He can,
Yeah.
like he's my hero. Anyway, so that's just like always. So anyway, I was thinking, I really like basketball. He goes, "How did you work out?" He goes, "You can make a lot of money playing basketball too." And after the talk, he didn't say anything about football. So I leave. I'm like,
That's what he said?
yes. I'm sitting there going, now keep in mind, I didn't know this, but the Steelers had a basketball team that you played on in the offseason, and you made money. We went and played all over around. Down in Columbus, Ohio, and Virginia. Yeah, we used to.
The Steelers used to play against the state troopers.
Yes, and
My dad, and my uncle used to play in that, and they played against Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yes.
Players.
Yeah. So the basketball team, you make money too. I mean, not that you make like playing money, but it was in the off season.
You're making money for having fun.
Right. I mean, it was so. I didn't know that, but that's why he asked me. But and so when I left, I was like, okay, of all the teams that have been here, the Pittsburgh Steelers are not drafting me.
Right.
They're more interested in my basketball skills and my football skills. They asked me nothing about football.
Right.
But he did say, God, I'll never forget. He goes, I got everything I need right here. And he just pointed at the tape that he was watching. That's which is true. Now that all the things I've done in football, I mean, that's how you tell the truth about a player. The tape you watch them on tape. Yeah. Now, getting to know them personally, you can find out, a little bit of their makeup and heart and character. You can have a better feel for that. The tape can't give you, but as a player, that's the only way you know. You can't watch a highlight reel or a game and think you know anything about it.
Right.
Oh yeah, we was watching videos last night. I was seeing you juke some people. I was sitting there, I was like, let's pull some tapes, because I haven't always, like, my name is big into sports. Like, I've always been big into music. And, so anytime there's football or basketball on, she's putting it on. And last night I was like, let me pull up some tapes on this guy. And I was like, he's over here juking people.
Well, you sure it wasn't my son you watched because
No, it was you. It was you.
my son, he was a better football player than I was.
One video I saw
Yeah,
insane. It's like something you do on Madden.
Well, that actual run that talking about my son Bo, that run. Okay, so ESPN used to tell me, hey, listen, if you ever have anything, because I coached a bunch of kids too. So I coached kids from 8 to 18. My son played. He goes, if you ever have some like a play that really stands out, send it in to us. And so I had a few plays. I'm like, I don't want it. I never did it. So he has this run, and I'm like, this is probably a run that would probably qualify as a top 10. So I sent it in. And I tell my producer, he texted me, goes, hey, listen, Bo made the top 10.
Oh, wow.
Oh, this is cool. So I tell Bo, it was after this game, I tell Bo, hey, you made the top 10. So we go home, we're watching it, right? So it starts at 10 and works its way up.
Right.
It gets all the way to like 2. And then 2's not him. I'm like, oh, Bo, they told me you were in the top 10. I said, I'm sorry, son. Number 1, Bo Hodge.
Oh, wow.
I didn't say number 1. I was like, we were always like, oh my gosh.
So cool.
I was like, I can't believe you told me you made it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, Bo. I never thought a million years you would be number 1.
Wow.
But it actually was, of all the plays, it was
Best one.
it was the best one. It wasn't, he didn't get it because of me by any stretch of me. Because actually there's a committee that votes.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah.
They
And
didn't
so, it might be even a small committee, but they don't, no one person sets that up so that they can do it arbitrarily, fair. It doesn't even know. Yeah. So when they narrow it down to 10, they say, okay, what will be our top 10?
So how was it, I guess, you transitioning from, well, I guess my first question is, how was it playing for, in the NFL? Like, what was that experience like for you? But then my follow-up is that transition from playing to being an analyst, because you were for a period of time,
Right.
which I think majority of players, whether football, basketball, they transition from playing to, commentating or being an analyst and stuff like that.
This might surprise you. There's about 1,900 jobs in the National Football League. Okay, so there's only 1,900. There's 5 million kids who start out playing football every year. Only 1,900 are ever going to play in the National Football League at any given year. Okay, and then the players rotate, get out of it. In the broadcasting industry, to do just football, I bet you there's way less than 100
Really?
jobs. That are national jobs.
Right.
And I might even, I'm stretching with 100, but there's 50
Oh,
that
wow.
are national jobs. So broadcasting actually is, I would argue, it would be harder
Harder
to
to
do.
get into.
Wow.
Just if you're going to cover the National Football League, it would be.
Yeah.
So then now listen, only if you apply for that, really qualify for that, you got to play it or coach it, to be a true
I think
analyst.
that's something on your resume for that.
Yeah, so it's going to be. You can still be, an analyst about, the NFL without having played it. But true NFL analyst jobs, players come out. Probably 50 is probably a stretch. 50.
Yeah.
It seems like the people that are doing it have been doing it for a while as well.
Yeah,
too, so.
yeah. There's, once you start, I was with ESPN for over 20 years. I helped launch ESPN2, which you guys are probably not. I don't know. I wasn't ask you on your board. So I helped launch it. So ESPN2, I went to ESPN to help. ESPN used to be just ESPN. There's nothing else. There was no ESPN News. There was not ESPN2. So this is not for all your, depending on if your viewers are just you guys. So they're like, what? I thought there's 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, news, watch.
Yeah. So there used to be. So I helped launch ESPN2.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if you remember this guy, Stuart Scott.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, Stu was one of my dearest friends of all time. Okay, well, I hired Stuart about the same time I hired me. And Stuart was our host on the matchup show, and he helped launch ESPN2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a funny
Stuart Scott was
question.
one of the
I can't remember his
big
name,
hires to do that.
but have you ever met the guy that says you're in the game from Madden?
The EA Sports guy.
I'll let you know.
No. What is his name?
I don't even know. Actually, I thought they changed.
You're in the game.
I thought Madden.
It's in the game.
Oh, it's in the game. You know, I used to. I've heard that so much that Bo would play. My son would play that all the time, so I would hear it. But see, I think Madden they switch voices up all the time.
Did
But
they?
that guy, you're right. I think he's been consistent. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know what his name was. No one. It sounds so popular now.
Yeah, but so ESPN2 started because they wanted to launch college football really with ESPN2. So that's how the college football got put on the
So
scene.
was ESPN at that time was just like the not collegiate, but like just like the nationals, like NBA, NFL.
Shoot, I don't think it had the NBA. Okay, what got ESPN really on the planet in the sporting world was they got an NFL TV contract. In fact, you guys will not remember this either. So TNT and ESPN used to split the season. So let's say there's 6 teams. You remember that? Okay, so they would split the season. ESPN would have the first half, TNT would have the last half, or vice versa. And then once ESPN got a full package of it, and part of what ESPN would do is they would run football shows year round, and all season long.
Right.
You know, like most CBS, Fox, and they do Sunday. ESPN does Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Every day, right.
Nobody
That was
else
different
does.
for ESPN.
Yeah, so ESPN was given, and they're the only ones doing it at the time. The only ones.
TNT does. They do like Thursdays for games, and sometimes TNT will do Saturdays. Well, for basketball, at least.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so they didn't have, they did another thing, I think, if I remember right, I think we got hockey. Next was hockey, that they kind of got a package hockey. Then they wanted to go, I think they went and got the NBA, lost the NBA, and then we've since got it back, and then Major League Baseball.
So you have to get a package for each sport, essentially.
Well, they didn't have it for each sport, you know, and
They was working their way to get.
but that's kind of how they had to get a package first to show they could do it.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, but football was the start for them. You know, in college football, they went out for college football. They really controlled college football, if you think about it. You know, Fox is only
There
True
were so
competitor.
many, well, and obviously everything has evolved, as far as like where you have the ability to watch,
more valuable.
sports and everything.
You can watch whatever you want now.
Seriously.
It's live everywhere.
Yes, you got access to everything.
Yeah.
That's not what it was in '72.
So I wanted to touch on, I was reading that in 2003, you were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's, I'm pronouncing it wrong.
You say
Non-Hodgkin's.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. I was like saying on the way here, and I'm like
Non-Hodgkin's.
trying to pronounce it and stuff. I'm like, James like, no, just let him say it. And I'm like, okay. But how was that, like just that adversity, because it's not.
Wait, well, can we ask what is that actually?
Well, you know what? Non-Hodgkin's. Okay, you hear Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's. Okay, what's the difference? I asked this too because I was like, what's the difference? Okay, now first of all, Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's, leukemia. Another one I'm forgetting.
Those are blood cancers.
Yeah, they're blood cancers. Okay, so they flow through the blood in some fashion.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the difference between. It's really complicated. Hodgkin's. The guy who actually found these particular cell types, his name was Hodgkins, So because he found it, they named it Hodgkin's.
Sure.
So he passes on, and then they started finding different cell types that were similar to the, they were like Hodgkin's. So they called them non-Hodgkin's because he had passed on. He's not the one who found them.
Right.
So that's how it is. They're really they're in the same. You know, like when you say I got Hodgkin's or non-Hodgkin's, there's still a bunch of different cell types.
We thought it was named after you. That's what we were debating last night.
No.
So maybe it was named after him.
Yeah, it was around long before me. But they it's a blood cancer that can be a different cell. I mean, we could actually all have non-Hodgkin's, but different cell types, and therefore we'd have all different treatments. And that's kind of what's confusing. Even for me, when I was diagnosed, I wanted to I know. They go, well, we gotta know your cell type and staging. What's that? What's the cell type? What do you mean? You don't know?
Right.
You know it's Hodgkin's. Well, you should know. I mean, I was just like, I was
was
bat crazy. I was like, because I wanted all these answers. I call it the dark days of diagnosis.
How old were you?
I was 38.
38.
Yeah, I was 38. And they, then they have to do a biopsy, and it just takes so much time. It just doesn't happen in a few minutes or an hour or a day. It takes several days.
Wasn't that found because you were injured, and then you went back to playing, and then got injured again or something?
Well, I was injured. I was actually in a car accident. The guy lost control of on the highway, and he broadsided our car, and it tore my labral in my left shoulder. So I had to have surgery to repair it. I was probably like 8-9 months out, and I had to have my final follow-up. So I had to do that anyway. But in the process, the only time I'd in the morning when I'd get up and go get in the shower, when I would duck my head, like if I just did that right there, like the middle of my back would hurt. I'd be like, God, that's weird, man. I'm like, and that's the only time it would hurt.
Yeah.
I never hurt any other time. So I tell my Dr. Bradley, who's still the team physician for the Steelers, about it. And this actually, Dr. Bradley actually saved my life.
That's what I was reading. He's the one that...
And he deserves a lot of credit from a physician perspective, knowing your patients, and he heard my symptoms.
Making that call.
Well, I go to see him, and he looks at my shoulder was fine, and he looks at my back, and he goes, let's get some x-rays. He gets some x-rays, he goes, everything looks fine. He goes, but why don't you get an MRI, just make sure. And I'm like, wait a minute. I go, I ain't got time for an MRI, because you just don't get an MRI.
Right. You gotta schedule one and get the
When I told him about the symptom, I was about a week out before I was coming to see him. He had scheduled an MRI for when I showed up if he needed it.
Nice.
And so I go to get the MRI. That's long story short. That's where they find it. Wow. I was actually heading home, and he called me. He said, "You gotta come back." And now listen, I don't know. See, they used medical terms. I'd never heard non-Hodgkin's or Hodgkin's. Maybe I've heard it, but I had no idea what it is. I thought it was a back issue he was talking about. I didn't. When he said Hodgkin's or non-Hodgkin's,
it's like, oh,
you didn't realize what
yeah, right. Okay, people say it's funny. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, I never had a Hodgkin's muscle back there, but that's what it's called. Because he had to go. He tells me I have to be a specialist tomorrow at like 6 in the morning. I show up, and it was the Hillman Cancer Institute. And I'm like, it's an odd place to have a back. But the hospitals have all different kinds of
So it
stuff.
wasn't until then that you realized the severity of it.
I didn't even realize it then. To be honest with you, that's how dumb I was. I walk right in, everybody's got scars on. Everybody, and I'm like, wow, this is the oddest place for a back. Still not thinking.
Where's the back doctor?
Yeah. So they as soon as I walked in, she grabbed me and she says, "Hey, why don't you come back here?" Now I knew something was up because 5 white coats walked in. Okay, not 1, 5.
Usually.
And I was like, that got my attention. And then somebody I think it was some lady put like an x-ray or like a scan up in the screen. She goes, oh boy, it looks like it. I go, looks like what? And she
you're just sitting there.
She goes, it looks like you have cancer. She goes, you got a tumor it's about 3 pounds, or the size and shape of a football too, by the way. So I was sitting, think about this. It's fascinating how the body is. So there's a 3-pound tumor the size and shape of a football that's sitting in my back, below my stomach. Right. Well, here's what had happened. Like, when I had that tumor, like I couldn't even do this because it would rob me of my freedom of movement. I didn't realize it. Like I'd get in my car and I'd hit my head on the top of the car every time I went to get in. I've been getting my truck for 38 years.
You
Never hit my
couldn't
head.
go like this.
I didn't have
and
any.
then
It was robbing me of my flexibility, but I didn't know it. It was.
Did you think that was more like, oh, I was, football? Like, this is like a football, like, oh, I'm just stiff or.
Get older.
Yeah.
No, I didn't even recognize that I had lost the mobility. I hadn't even recognized it.
Oh, wow.
In all fairness, I had not recognized.
It was in routine.
I would just adjust. I just made adjustments to things I couldn't. Like, okay, if you're driving and you gotta look to the left, okay, doing that, I couldn't do that. So I remember I was like, why can't I do? So I would just turn like this so I could look.
Right.
So I just make all these little adjustments so I
Right.
can move. I have no idea.
Oh, wow.
And then when you said that, I was like, oh, that. So that was.
And then you beat it from what I read in 2015.
Well, my last, I had a year and a half of treatment. And honestly, today, I just found a note out today on this same subject. I go, when I walked out of that chemotherapy room, I'm never coming back here. I'll never walk back in this room.
Yeah.
I'm done with this. I had to have follow-ups for 6 years. But 2015, I had open heart surgery. And this is where I'm grateful for cancer. And I never thought I'd say this, but they detected my aorta deficiency by doing scans that you would only do. It's like, not everybody, like you guys are healthy, you go to the physical, nobody's gonna do a pet cat on you, a pet cat scan.
Right.
They only gonna do, if anybody does a pet cat scan on you, there's something going on. I mean,
Right.
they're looking for details of your body. There's something that's suspicious, or you got something going on. Okay, so that's a very detailed exam. So on the last pet cat I had, which was 5 years removed from my last treatment, I went to the same guy every year and every 6 months except this time, because they couldn't get me into the Hillman Center. I had to go somewhere else. And the guy who reads the scan saw my aorta deficiency, he was enlarged. It's like having here's what my problem is. I had a bubble in my hose of my aorta.
Right.
So it's like having a bubble in your garden hose. So they said, well, listen, and one of two ways it could happen. It could be a genetic defect, which could be, it could happen to anybody, genetically not developed right, or they find it with a lot of like power lifters, Olympic athletes, people who are always explode and recover, and they stress their heart.
It's like a blood clot.
Yeah, it's like you blow it out, like you got this perfect tube and its blood flows here, and you put so much pressure,
kind of,
and then you bubble it. Yeah. It's like a garden hose. You get a bubble because there's too much pressure. And so when they find it, I'll just fast forward to what the conclusion of that. I was like, God, you wonder would I have ever had a symptom of that? I asked the doctor before we were having open heart surgery. Actually, he goes, where do you think they had discovered it or I had a symptom? He goes, in your autopsy. He goes, you would never had a symptom. He goes, and had you, you would have had to have been at a hospital at the front door, and the person who first saw you would have had to have known you had an aorta eruption to have any shot of survival.
Wow.
I was like,
all because you went and saw a different doctor that you haven't seen.
and his eyes looked at something different. And
was that Stan?
Yeah, it was Stan on Stan's group, yeah. Stan.
Wow.
And so that sent me into open heart surgery to get it fixed.
Wow. It saved your life, basically.
Again, it did. Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
I mean, because when I eventually had it done, numbers won't be anything to you, but let's say 1 is a normal aorta. You all have a normal 1. Mine was at around the 6.5, which is emergency surgery level. So what I'm saying is, I was trained too, so I just kept training, and at some point it would have busted.
Wow. That's crazy.
I know that probably, being told you had cancer, there's a surreal darkness to that, because there's so much uncertainty, because treatment, cure, survival, all that comes into play. Open heart is final.
Yeah.
Like once you decide to go, it's final. I mean, so what I'm getting at, if it doesn't work, if this surgery doesn't work, that's it. So the day you select, it's just, both are different.
Works.
Yeah, both are different, but it's I don't suggest either one. them for
Right.
anybody. But there's a they're not the same. Somebody asked me, "Oh, this is it similar?" I'm like, no, it was very different. It was the reality of it. But
Because here you thought, you were just, getting through your chemo and, all of that, and then here you're doing your, your you said 6 months, right? Your scans and everything, and then bam. So now you just thought you
And I
got
have
over
no
one
questions and
obstacle,
things,
and now
in
here's another
fact,
one.
Stan Marks called me and he said, because it was my last scan, so I was excited about hearing, how I'm cancer free. I wanted to hear that so bad.
Right.
And he said, you're cancer free. And when he was saying it, I was like, he doesn't sound excited about
Yeah.
it. There's something I can tell in his voice. He goes, you're cancer free. But I'm like, why is there a but, Stan?
Yeah.
Why is there a but? Don't give me a but, Stan.
Right.
He's like, well, he goes, you just gotta look into it. Your aorta was a little large, they said. And I don't know if it's anything serious, but get it looked at.
Just to be on the safe side.
Yeah. Like,
Wow.
but how about this is how dumb I am. He goes, your aorta's large. I go, what's your aorta? I have no idea. I'm like, your aorta. He goes, that's your heart muscle. I'm like, well, of course it's bigger. I'm thinking, these knuckleheads, my heart's. I've been trained my whole life. These
Right.
That's why I said, I was like, these idiots. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I kept driving on. And then when I found out what it was really, I was like, oh, how stupid am I? Sometimes it's good to be stupid because it didn't really shock me when he said it.
Yeah.
I was like,
It didn't shock you. You probably had a heart attack.
yeah, probably. Probably had it right.
Before I get a minute, beating both of those take you down the path to motivational speaking?
Actually, no. It's a good question though, but I kind of been. I find myself to be. I'm grateful I stumbled across. I got to play for the Steelers for numerous reasons, but Chuck Noll was he's the greatest man I ever met.
Everyone speaks very highly of him.
He was more than a coach. He was more than a leader. He was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He was a teacher and a challenger. And he constantly was challenging us. He'd always say, this is one of his famous sayings. He would say, listen, your life's work is not football. I don't care how long you guys play, how good you think you are, your life's work is not football. Mm-hmm. You're going to do something a lot longer than this, so always be prepared for that, do stuff. And I remember when I was a rookie, I was like, and this is when Chuck was towards the end of his career, and everybody was saying the game had passed him by. I'm like, oh yeah, it's passed him by. He thinks that we can't play forever. I'm like, you don't know what he's talking about. He's 4 Super Bowls on. They're 4 days. He's won 4 Super Bowls, and I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. And but I remember I'm 21 years old, and there was just something inside me. Man, you will never run across another human being like this. Yeah. Pay attention. And he always sparked me to do my part. He said, he always would talk about the stage. You got a stage that very few get.
Right. It's very
Use it, don't abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
So many people abuse it, and you can be abusing it by just neglecting it or thinking that you're on this stage and you're better than everybody else, which is not the way to handle it. So, how speaking came about, it was my last treatment. A good friend of mine, Charlie LaValle, who's just a great man, has done a lot of charity work here in Pittsburgh. He hired a film crew. They filmed me from leaving my house to 12 hours of treatment, to going home, to working out, to the basketball game I would play afterwards. And he was talking to me, and we were talking about finding a way how that came about. He'd never heard about that. And he's like, holy cow, Merril. He goes, you need to write a book on that. And at that time, I thought we were doing this because my kids had something.
Right.
So the interview was about my kids, really, and just being a parent. And I said, Charlie, listen, I survived, I'll write your book. And that's how I just left it at that, because I never thought twice about it again. So like a year later, he called me up. He said, "You remember that?
Remember that book?
Yeah, you remember that promise?" And I was like, "Oh, Charlie."
Yeah, at least you stuck to it. It made you
Yeah, but it took me like 5 years to write the book. But I write the book, and then somebody asked me to come speak, and I spoke, and there was an agency out there, and they asked me if I'd be interested in doing that for corporations and different events. And I'm like, I would. And here's funny, like if there was one class in high school and college that I would not want to sign up for?
Public speaking.
Public speaking.
Yeah, I think everybody
I would
should
be
do
like,
that.
and I believe in college and high school. I know I had to take one. I remember this in college. Like, I think you had to take some course like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was petrified every time I had
Both
to
high
do that.
school and college, I had to.
Yeah, me too.
I was petrified. I was like, oh my gosh.
I was in theater. I can't do public speaking though. I'm not
That's
a
crazy.
speech.
See, I'm the opposite. I like the artsy, like theater and art and stuff. That's not my area. I could never do that. But like public speaking, I don't want to do it, but like I know I can like build up the
Must have encouraged them.
Exactly. Like all right, you practice, you get used to it and stuff like that. But the art stuff is like because
That's all
even
different.
with cooking, like that's an art. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And like with your music, that's an art. I'm more of the like not artsy stuff. That's like my side, the non-artsy stuff.
The sports stuff is all.
Yeah, sports. I like
Wow.
sports. It's easy.
That's funny.
So then 5 years now, and Find a Way was your first.
Find Away is my first book, and I'll share this because somebody might have written a book and they never knew this.
I always wanted to write one.
So, well, you know what? I'm glad I've done it for a bunch of reasons. One of them, like my kids get to read. My grandkids are reading books now, so I'm like, holy cow! I get to. There's like a documentary, kind of a big portion of my life. So, I was in Philadelphia speaking, and this professor came up after, and she's like, "Hey, there's your heart surgery in your book, Find a Way." And I was like, "Wow, that happened after I published it." And she said, "Well, why don't you republish it?" And I said, "You can do that."
Republished?
I'm like, "What?" I go. So I called I mean, who knows? There might be one person out there, maybe nobody out there that's written a book. But and if you have or you're going to, this is good to know because I never knew it. So I called my publisher. And I said, hey, can we republish this? And when you republish it, and he said, oh, absolutely. So you republish it, but you add stuff, or you might even want to change some stuff that have changed, if there's a case like that. But I just had things I had to add to the book.
Oh, wow.
And you can republish it, and therefore it's the second edition. So I did that, yeah. I was like, holy cow.
So you were able to just like add to.
So I could probably republish. I doubt I ever will. But at that point, I had a bunch of things that were significant. My open heart surgery was my ESPN career had ended. So there was a lot of Find a Way stuff actually in there that I've had to exercise that again in my life and learn, find a new passion, a new craft. And so we added it to that, but I never knew you could do that.
Wow. So when did you republish that?
Shoot, that's been like 3 years ago, 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you have 2 books.
Yeah, so my other book was Brainwashed. Which I did that before I did the republishing.
Okay.
And what I did, and actually Find a Way was about, I was able to add Brainwashed in there too, what sparked that.
Oh, okay, nice.
And how I got into writing that book too, so that they both were tied
together.
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Well, how long was it like between the books that you wrote the second one?
So Find a Way, I think it's 10 years from Find a Way to Brainwashed.
Oh man.
Oh wow.
And then the re-edition of Find a Way comes like year 11. So Find a Way, the second edition is actually newer than Brainwashed.
Okay.
Even though it was done 10
Alright,
years.
yeah,
That makes any sense.
yeah,
People watch this go, what it's kind of got lost. So it's technically was written years ago, but because it's been refreshed in a way or added to, it's the newer book.
And what's Brainwashed about?
Well, Brainwashed is probably the book that there's a lot of, it's hard to pick which one I like the most. It means a lot to me because of, I have this saying that, because I'm not a lawyer, but I've been in court enough to be a lawyer and for various things. And what I've always found out in the court of law, you have a 99.9% chance of winning when you have the truth and the evidence of the truth.
Yeah.
I've never walked into any courtroom and not feel comfortable because I have both the truth and evidence of the truth. Well, a lot of people will say, well, your career ended because of a concussion, and that is 100% incorrect. My career ended because of improper care of head trauma. that's what happened to me. I had a severe head trauma on a Monday night game in Kansas City. I get cleared to return back to practice 5 days later over the phone by the doctor who saw me, and he asked me one question: how do you feel? Now in 1994, that's archaic. I'm just telling you this. Like even in 1994, if you went back and looked at protocols and how you handle people with head trauma, and I don't care what environment it is, nobody gets cleared over the phone.
Right.
You see the person,
Right.
and you see an expert at the very least, especially in the National Football League.
Right.
Well, I mean, that quite honestly was the start of something I would never foresee coming. My career now has been linked to concussions, head trauma, and now this thing you hear CTE. So if an athlete, a football player, dies young or commits suicide, if their brain goes to Boston University, they're going to have CTE, and football caused it. And that being said, there is not one shred of scientific evidence that proves that. Now, when I say not one shred of evidence, people might know this a little bit and have heard stuff they've heard it in the media. So the first thing, this is the only way you can know the truth and know if I'm telling the truth, which I want people to be skeptical of me. I encourage people to be skeptical all the time. Be skeptical of me, but be so skeptical that you actually do what I'm about to tell you to do, that you have to do to even have a remote truth about this. You have to go read the scientific literature.
Right.
So I give you two papers, the spectrum of disease paper and the early exposure paper. Okay, like have you ever heard of those papers? You've heard? Okay, so those papers, if you don't read those papers, okay, those are just two of dozens upon dozens that I had to read in order to do the book. But what I ultimately found is that if you do science correctly, first of all, science takes time, and science is not easy. And if you do science right, it's going to tell you the truth.
Right.
It will tell you the truth. Here's the problem, and this is a majority of science, not just in this area. The majority of science is done incorrectly. There's hypotheses, people have an agenda, people misinterpret things.
Yeah.
So
you have to be careful who you're interacting with or like speaking to when it comes to science, because everyone doesn't view it the same.
But they can view it the same. See, if you take, okay, I'll just tell you this. So here's, I don't care what science we're talking about, there's a few things that have to take place. The first one, let's say we all have in here are scientists, okay? Let's say you do a paper on, I don't care what your subject is, something about water, okay? And now, whatever you said in that paper, somebody has to replicate and duplicate what you just did.
Right.
Meaning, we've got to now take and do the same type of study and see if we're going to come up with you. Now, maybe we all do. Maybe all three of us do, and we're like, okay, we're going somewhere. Now we're just going somewhere.
Right.
We haven't found anything. We're going somewhere.
Right.
And you've got to repeat this, replicate, and duplicate it. Okay, so we'll just start there. Every paper that I just mentioned, the spectrum of disease paper, early age exposure paper, and we can go on all these papers that Boston University has come out with, has been replicated and duplicated up to 12 to 15 times. None of them have been able to come up with anything remotely close to what their scientific paper said. Now, does their science say anything about head trauma in the sense of link or cause? Nothing. Now, here's the problem. What they've said in the media. Let's go spectrum of disease paper. Okay, and the key authored that. She's an MD. So she signed a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. In the conclusion of that scientific paper, it says caution must be used. I'm going to paraphrase, but caution must be used is the actual words used. Now after this, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. You can't give anybody any sense of degree of CTE in living athletes, professionally or military. So I'm saying again, caution must be used. You cannot, didn't say you shouldn't, it says you cannot give anybody, that means you, the media, anybody, any sense of degree of CTE in athletes and military. She's asked in the paper, the media asked her, after doing that research, what do you think? Quote, I got to believe after doing the research we just did, that I authored and wrote, caution must be used. You cannot give anybody any sense of degree of CTE. I got to believe all players have it. Okay, so she says that. What do you think is on the evening news and in the paper and everywhere else that you see? All football players have CTE. Football causes CTE.
They love to blame it on football.
Yeah, now so when I'm telling you, there's not one, so their own science doesn't even say it, okay?
Right, so she contradicted herself based off of what...
You're kind. She's abused, if not crucified, the Hippocratic Oath that she signed. What she has done is deplorable and harmful to people, because now people actually, when I was on my book tour, I remember I was a guy in Salt Lake, he was doing his radio show, and he said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Shouldn't we be able to trust and believe the doctors?" And I was like, you know what, you are exactly right. And that's where there's two problems here now. The MD that said that's malpractice. For her to say something of that egregious and that deplorable and that harmful, to allow her to even be a doctor anymore, this shouldn't happen. Yeah. And you as a journalist have a responsibility to go read her stuff before you believe it, because you can't access that. It is not private. Anybody can go get these papers. I understand it's not easy to find. You gotta go to all these different journals, scientific journals to find, but you can find them, you can read them, you can verify it. And that's what, so it's a long-winded answer to your question. When I found out what the truth was, then I asked how much is it going to cost me. So my Find a Way book, they paid me to write it. Okay, that's a different story. When they pay you to write the book. Now I got to pay to write a book. It's a little under $200,000 to write this book.
What?
Thank you. Information. Exactly what I said. And I was like, okay, because all of the things that are going to take place to have to. I mean, that's why when people want to write a book, it ain't cheap. Now I'm not going to say it's going to cost you that, but with all of the research that we needed to do, the verifications of stuff, the writing, I mean, all of the stuff, the editing that had to go place. I mean,
that's a heavy topic, especially now.
So I say no. Because of the price. I was like,
no.
I mean,
no.
Why? I just like because only Harry Potter makes money on books too. So let's get that out. Let's get out there. It ain't like you're gonna make millions. People, you just don't make millions writing books. Okay. So that being said, I mean, honestly, I can't sleep for a week. I cannot sleep for a week, and here's why I couldn't sleep. I ultimately come to this conclusion, and I have utter peace with this today. If I know the truth, and I have all the evidence of the truth, and I don't say anything, I'm worse than they are. I am worse than they are. Yeah. Because how many things have we seen gone wrong, and people go, well, I didn't want to get involved. Oh, you just as bad. You might be worse. Yeah. Okay? I mean, or you jump in. One of two things happen. Either one of them are not good.
If you watch it happen, you're just
as guilty.
Yes. So that's what I decide. You know what? And ironically, kind of the way my whole career has been, it's that has been surrounding me my entire career. And once I validated, I'm grateful. But it's changed. I mean, they still are doing and then when I talked to a lot of these I bet you there was a majority of the scientists I talked to, a lot of them wanted to be silent in the thing because they have grants coming or, which is actually, okay, you think of a reputation. Wouldn't you have a good reputation for telling the truth?
Yeah, you would think.
You would think. That's what science community is wicked. They're weak, and there's cowards in there, and it's disturbing because you can go shoot. I could give you subject upon subject. You guys would never know this, but 1977. And this is for all of your audience to do research on, because I would want them to do this because there's papers done on this, scientific papers, articles on this. And you can't hide history. So in 1977, our government gives our country the first dietary guidelines for better, healthier lifestyle.
Okay.
And that guideline was get rid of fat. Get rid of fat. Okay, now your eyes crinkle, so you might have some nutritional background. If anybody has any nutritional background, you need fat to survive.
Yeah.
Your organs need fat to survive. The biggest organ you have in your body needs the most, your brain. You need it to survive. And there was a campaign done by our government to get rid of fat because they said the research was showing that fat was the leading cause of heart disease. When that was not the leading cause of heart disease, sugar is the leading cause of heart disease. So listen, for almost a decade, what happens? Every advertisement, zero fat, zero fat. So what does America do? They look at zero fat, they grab it. They don't flip it around and there's
Actually,
32 grams of sugar, 48 grams of carbs.
I look at that's the first thing I look at now.
Yeah.
Now, but not
Yeah,
1977.
no.
So for years, that campaign was run. Now, if you go back and look at the history of that, they used some science that was manipulated. The sugar industry paid the scientists off
Of course.
to manipulate the science, point the finger at fat, not point the finger at sugar.
That's when diet soda came out.
Well, that's when the big Pepsi and Coke were going on to their. I mean, it's just, so what I'm getting at is like, okay, those articles come out now, and now you get, those decades later, all those come out. Well, why wouldn't somebody stand up at that point? Somebody in that whole area,
So afraid to.
they knew this was being done
Because
wrong.
when you, in my little bit of experience, but like when you're the one that stands up and says something or does something that's not the standard of what everyone else in your community or your group is doing, they look at you differently.
Sure.
And
You're right.
especially now, people are afraid to be viewed differently. Everyone wants to be the same, whether it's what they see on TV or social media or who they interact with in person. Everyone wants to, not everyone, but you have a majority that wants to be the same. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to have their own opinions, their own thoughts, and
Well, you're right. I mean, you're spot on. And then just people are. That's the right words to say here without saying the wrong words. Some people, you're so gullible. I mean, and you're weak and
well,
stupid is actually
if
the
you
best
see it
way.
on the news, you think it's
Right.
legitimate.
And I hear somebody one more time go, "Oh, I saw it on the news." I'm like, okay. First, I was in the industry for about 27 years. Okay,
Yeah.
I know what goes on in those rooms. And guess what? There's human beings in that room. And if you think for 1 second that the human being is going to be fair and honest and present stuff in factual form like it used to be.
Especially at that high of a standard.
And you're right. Okay, let's take the weather for example. This is how it is in local weather. This is the truth. Okay, if let's say it's 50-50 chance of rain, you think they're going to come out and say 50-50 chance of sun?
No.
It is going to be rain, gloom, doom and gloom. Everything is doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. Let's go to negative. Let's go to blood. Let's go to death. Let's
And
go to
that's
fear.
That's
I mean,
with all news is like that. It doesn't matter, people look at CNN and like, oh, it's CNN, but then you have Fox News, you have ABC News. You have,
Probably not I see on the news.
Now
that's
it's
why I
just,
don't watch it.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
It's just
good.
there to scare you.
Yeah.
You turn on the news in Pittsburgh, oh my God. You go to the barbershop, turn on the news channel, and it's just everything is negative.
Exactly.
Just to put fear.
yeah.
That's why people, when I said they need to be skeptical, people need to have some common sense too.
Yeah.
We go back to the brainwashed book I wrote and the fact of football, hockey, soccer is causing this pattern. Now let's explain the pattern first of all. There is a thing called a CTE pattern. Okay? This is the scientific fact. Okay, nobody can argue this. It is in an observation state. Like they don't even know what causes it or what it might cause. Okay, so they have no answers for anything. Of the people in the medical journal who have this pattern, over a third have never played a sport in their life. Some of them are 3 years old to 6-year-olds some are females, who have this pattern. They've never played football. Okay, so right there, going back to what are some steps of science, okay, replicating and duplicating is a must.
Right.
Then you must have
Exactly the same
controls.
results.
Right, and if we don't, then it takes. That's why science is so hard. So it takes all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's what all this has done to this point. None has validated what Boston University says in the paper, and none of their science, because their science is garbage, says anything that they have said. So then the next thing that you need to do is you need to have controls or blind studies, depending on what you're doing. Okay, if you don't do those 2 steps right there, okay, your science work is irrelevant. And then this last one, which they will never do. Think about this: you must collaborate. So let's say I've got some great research that they're so profound and so proud about, they won't let anybody look at it. That doesn't ring anybody's ear like, that's odd, or that's disturbing, or why not? They won't let anybody come in and look at their stuff. They will not let anybody look at that. People that are much superior. In my book, I talked about 11 neuroscientists, way more credentialed than Anne McKee.
Yeah.
All these brains were looked at before they got to Boston University. Nobody can find that pattern. Gets there,
And then the pattern
and she finds it. She finds out the people, the brains. They did this. The other paper, the 110 out of 111 brains that got all this publicity. Okay, do you think she would let anybody look at those other brains?
No.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, right. Why? Let me tell you this: if you are being honest and you have integrity, why wouldn't you do that? If you're
You
doing the
show people
structure
your
of
work.
something.
But there's even ways you can protect yourself before you show somebody. And then, why would you not?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, here's how you protect yourself. What you said is true. That's how I protect myself. What I said is true. Look at it. There it is. I believe it. None of those steps have been ever done for them. And so when I found that out, and listen, and this is a fact for all of us. It doesn't matter what profession you're in. These 3 things are going to dictate your short and long-term health to about 90%. Age, genetics, and lifestyle. There's only one thing you have control over, and that's your lifestyle. And we're all responsible for that. We got a lot of we have a lot of players, and not the majority, but a lot of players who have not taken care of themselves, drinking, have done nothing for their overall health for 25 years, and it's not that 25 years of erosion. It's football that I played 25 years ago. That's why I am the way I am. I played the game for 22 years. I know that you can have aches and bruises, and the game can cost you some of that. Okay, nobody put a bullet gun to their head and said, hey, you got to play it. Okay, we chose to play it. What'd you do when you got out of the game? There's no accountability for that. Everybody wants to say, oh, it's football. The one guy who this is like almost 3 years ago, he was struggling cognitively. So his wife was talking about in the article, it was football. Okay, football did it. That's why he has cognitive. He was a raging alcoholic for 20 years. Okay, if there was any stack of scientific evidence of how alcohol is destructive to the entire body, especially the brain, it would be alcohol. The science work, it stands.
You would
like
think
this.
that would be the first thing that would pop out to someone when hearing that story.
At least the interviewer asked her, he goes, well, isn't this anything to do with alcohol in his life? She goes, no, he quit. I'm like, wait a minute. He quit football too. So how can you blame football? And he just quit drinking a year ago.
Right.
He's been drinking for 40 years.
Yeah.
He played football for 20 seconds. That doesn't register.
Yeah.
He quit drinking. When we know what alcohol does to the brain, that's not even a mystery. That is a fact. What alcohol does. You have no scientific evidence to back what you're claiming, and you don't even. And all of the symptoms that he's dealing with was alcohol related, but it wasn't that. It was, and I'm just like, gosh, it's disturbing just that how just weak and stupid people are, and how they get looking for an excuse. There's no accountability.
I think it's easier to believe what people are telling you instead of actually doing your own research and not even research, but just having your own opinion and I wonder if that is the case. And then I go I like asking questions because I feel like I'm gonna learn something, and then no question is a stupid question. So, but not everyone's like that, especially for things that don't pertain to them. It's easy for someone to just say, oh, well, football causes CTE because they don't care about football and they don't care about that. So they just agree with the normal or what the
They just
media
wanted
is
to make it
saying.
look bad.
Yeah, but
Everybody tries to blame everything on football when it comes to health and injuries and stuff like that.
And there's the truth. There's no.
So many movies on it.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of CTE, you have foundations first around that particularly, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm on the Chuck Knoll Foundation on that board, and that's really what you do. It isn't. I mean, what we do for the Chuck Knoll Foundation is all brain health.
Gotcha.
Okay, there's a global aspect of brain health. From mental health to science work for head trauma. How can we get protocols in place? Treatment, care, repair. There's a big scope. We attack all of that. We try to help all of that and help people in those fields so that we can create a better, safer environment. Like when you think about football today, okay, now this is when I played. Okay, and this is a fact. A helmet today is 100% better than it was just 10 years ago.
yeah.
I believe it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just 10 years ago, it's 100% better. Okay, from absorption and deflection. Okay. When I played with that, you probably don't remember this.
Probably nothing in that
Sears Roebuck plastic thing. Had some straps in it, Now, so equipment is superior to what we've had for say 9 years. Superior. How we go about the instruction of the game, to play the game properly. Okay, no more throwing my elbow around your head, beating with the crown of my head, doing all
Yeah, that
things.
was fine, you.
Right, it's not, and then that's gotten, the misconception, the misunderstanding of that is unfortunate, which I'll get to it if we have time for it. But the most important thing, let's say equipment wasn't better. Let's just say they kept playing the way that they were playing.
Yeah.
There's now a protocol in place that if you have any type of head trauma, they remove you. You have to go through proper steps before you can return to play. And most of the time, you're being removed anyway. Then you get treatment and care to rehab yourself, which I watched my son go through that. So I know where it stands today versus where it was 30 years ago when I played. And that includes all sports, not just football. Every sport should have that. So if you're going to have a kid, if you're going to say, well, when would you want to play sports? When would be the best time to play sport? Today. Today is the best time in the history of sports to be playing sports.
That's true.
And we have more and more kids not playing sports because of the fear of sports, which is
You're not
their own
playing
edge
football
part.
because you're gonna get this.
Right, you're going to get hurt or you're going to get a concussion.
So with what you do with the Chuck Knoll Foundation, is that for just the NFL and like? Right?
That's for, actually,
just-
that's not even for the NFL. Our organization started the foundation, and it was really to help in all aspects of
All
brain health.
sports.
Yeah, not even just sports.
Just
I mean, we're
brain
not
health in general.
brain health. I mean, it's about people who struggle with depression, anxiety. How can we help in all areas of brain health
How long have
and
you
head
been
trauma?
doing that? Because I feel like mental health, at least within the past couple of years,
It's been
it's expanded, but
It
not
has.
only more so for men, it's expanded. More people are talking about it, it's
Right.
being accepted more.
I've been on the board, I think it's like 4 or 5 years. I think we started about 5 years ago. In fact, Jerome Bettis and I have a golf outing in September,
nice.
September 27th at Levelwood for the foundation. But it's to help, try to, in all areas of brain health, injury, repair, recovery, protocols. We try to be active in all those areas.
It's a real good signature, man.
I appreciate
This
it.
is one of our
Okay.
game balls. We just had an event. We call it Swavey Football, where we just come out with a family and we just play football. It's usually like girls versus guys, or
Oh, that's cool.
and have a bunch of girls playing. And this is our game ball. Well, we're gonna put this up.
Yeah, I'm not gonna use that
Oh.
either.
You see it, guys. The sign. We see guys a little stage. My name was like, "We gonna play with that ball?" I was like, "We gotta play with it a little bit before we."
You'd be like my son. I got him a Ray Lewis jersey, and he was out in the backyard playing with it, and everybody's like, "What are you doing?"
Right. No, that needs
Bo was
to
like,
be.
"Yeah, I'll play with it." He goes, "What do I do with it?" I said, "Well, I'm with you. Just go play with it, bro."
Well, that concludes episode 23, guys, of our podcast with, again, Merril Hoge here, and a lot of information shared. I'll put all of his handles, his books, the foundations that he's working with, all in the description. So definitely check that out and tune in with us for episode 24 next week. And then we will be vlogging our trip to Mexico in a week and a half. So stay tuned for that. Again, Merril Hoge, thank you so much.
Is there anything else you want to
Yeah, anything
add
last
before we
words
wrap this
to
up?
our viewers?
Well, I'll add this. You know, I think people always want to know. You know, you're an example of success, and you're an example of these two things. I've known it personally. I've confirmed it with businesses I've talked to because I get asked questions when I'm done. They're done asking me questions. I get asked them questions. I think everybody wants to be successful. You know, what are some of the keys to success? These are two things that I think are pillars to people that are successful, and success is it's all degrees of success. One is integrity. Everybody gets exposed for integrity. You just rather get exposed for having it than not having it,
Right.
because eventually you'll get exposed for it. And being true to not just yourself, but to what you do. There will always be peace to that, or there will always be uncomfortable. There'll be uncomfortable if you're not. And then the last one, which is kind of what James did. It's what I've done so many times. Is you've got to be able to self-reflect. Like if you can't look in the mirror and look at where you are, where you want to go, and then what are you responsible for and moving forward or moving on, it's hard to grow. It's just hard to grow, and it's hard to be successful. You know, if you sit in a toxic locker room and you're always pointing fingers or casting blame or making an excuse for where you are, there's nobody. I mean, everybody has issues, or everybody has. You know, some people got dealt a worse hand than others. There's all true to that. I didn't come from a lot of money. I had no money. When my parents told me at age 12, if you want anything beyond food and room and board, you go get it yourself. So I've put it to the test, but I've done with all these other companies, and like you find people that are successful, they do those two things. Like you just can't grow as a person or get better unless you reflect on yourself. If you do that, and the only way we get better is that we grow, we learn from each other, and that helps you grow. You know, and I'll tell you what, I found so much peace in being able to go, man, that's the wrong thing. You know, I shouldn't have done that. Well, I'm gonna change that. You know, yeah. And I'm just, you know, hopefully that can help some people that might be stuck. You know, sometimes you get stuck somewhere, and you know, you're sitting in that toxic locker room. And how do I know that toxic locker room exists? Where you point fingers, cast blame, make excuses. I've been there. I've garnered no success by being like that. It's just been miserable. You're in the same blender every single day. And I got tired of being in the same blender.
That's what I think that I love about this in this podcast. But this is really what this podcast is about, and a lot of people that we've had conversations with, you know, is being able to reflect, you know, like where they started, what he was, what he's becoming, and just enjoying the journey. You know, especially with everything you have already been through. You know, you've already been through a lot, and myself likewise, and Arlena and James, we've already been through so much, and now where we are now, we can just kind of like look back, you know, at those situations, and we're continuing to grow, and it's just a part of that journey, you know, to, you know, help us lead up to the person we are. And we say it all the time, it's not always about what you know or who you know, it's about what people know you for. You know, the person you are, integrity and value. You know, if someone were to say, what do you know about this person? You know, what they can honestly say, and it's the truth. You know, and that's what I love about just having this conversation with you, because prior I've known certain things, but I knew I wanted to go into just with just open my mind and getting to know the person that you are and what you really have to say.
I sure appreciate that. Thank you guys for coming.
Of course, thank you so much.
Have fun in Mexico.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And we appreciate having James on here for the
Good
introduction.
man.
I met James through networking because I've been doing music for quite some time, and then when we started the brand, James started his brand right around the same time, and we just kind of ended up through social media, and we've been super tight since then. And so as he left linking up with you, he had nothing but good things to say about you. He was like, yo, set you guys up for the podcast. I was like,
James,
great.
you need to make that happen.
That was the
So,
most surreal thing I've ever been through. Like,
Yeah, he was
I
deep
didn't-
about it
I
too.
didn't even know what full circle meant until that. I was like, what the?
Yeah.
That's true story, James. I love it. Thank you, brother.
Well, that concludes episode 23, guys. Stay tuned for episode 24 and stay swavy.